Live from New York, it's Engineering Legends.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Engineering Legends podcast. I'm Tiffany Long, here with my co-host,
Kelly Rogers, here in Brown and Caldwell's New York City office here in Midtown Manhattan.
Yep, we started this podcast about a year ago, and this is the first time we are all live together and in the same room.
Yeah, usually it's dogs under the tables, pajamas, but we are just real people here today, so we're really excited.
That's right, and we're doing this for a special episode to celebrate International Women in Engineering Day, which is today, June 23rd. In honor of this annual holiday, we're excited to welcome today's guests. Pam Elardo, New York City DEP Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment, and Liz Girardi Schoen, Pfizer Corporation's Global Environmental Sustainability Leader.
So the Society for Women Engineers, or SWE, sponsors International Women in Engineering Day, so the women of yesterday and today can inspire future women by celebrating achievements and raising awareness for equal representation in engineering.
The same organization, SWE, reported in a 2018 survey that only 15% of engineers are women.
And we'd like to do our part to change that.
That's right.
So the focus of today's episode will be to talk to two trailblazing guests about their experiences rising to leadership in the engineering and science industry, mentorship to other women, and strategies to continue to promote gender equality. So let's get started with some introductions. We can start with you, Pam. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Like you said, I work for the Department of Environmental Protection in New York City. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Wastewater Service Area, the entirety of the 9+ million people who come around New York City every day. So I've been here 6 years, and I grew up in the environmental engineering type field. Started in the state of Washington, eventually ran the wastewater system for metropolitan Seattle area, and then landed in New York City to do the biggest, baddest, best, craziest scale of them all. So this is why I'm here today.
Fantastic. Liz?
Oh, pleasure to meet everyone. So Liz Girardi Schoen, I'm the Global Environmental Sustainability Leader for Pfizer. And I have a long history with Pfizer, but a bit of a boomerang in the middle. So I'm a chemical engineer by training. And I started in what was Pfizer's Brooklyn plant at the time, manufacturing chemicals and then pharmaceuticals. And then I helped form the environmental program for Pfizer back then. And I left Pfizer in 2008 in the midst of big restructuring. I did some consulting. I worked for a solar power company as their head of environment, and then for Teva, which is another pharma company, and back at Pfizer 4 years. So I'm happy to say Pfizer's environmental program's been around probably as long as I have, because I helped form it. And happy to be here.
So we'd love to hear about your rise to leadership, a little bit about your journey of how you got here. So when you began your career, did you ever imagine that you'd have a role in leadership? Was that something you aspired to?
I would be shocked if I saw myself where I'm at if I was as a young person. I didn't expect it. I didn't dream of it. I feel like it didn't seem as a tangible reality to me as a young engineer at all. And then it just started to happen slowly over time. So I didn't see myself there. No, I'm kind of, I'd love to have my young self meet up with me now to say, hey, you're going to do that. And that would be pretty
Do you feel
inspirational.
were you encouraged to kind of aspire to those types of things as a child? Or?
No. I mean, I had a, sort of conservative, pretty sexist type upbringing, and my expectation for my family and the surrounding was, whatever you do depends on who you get married, that kind of thing. Even going to engineering school, I mean, I heard, well, do you know that's a man's job? So yeah, I think for me, luckily, I had a skill set, loved math and science, and a passion for the environment, and that's what I hung on to. And I think luckily that's what kind of drove me to the field I ultimately ended up in.
Yeah. So I was thinking about, a lot of stereotypes maybe with, Italian family upbringing, but ours was very much an egalitarian household, because my dad used to say there were 7 of us in the house, 5 kids, and the parents, 7 days in the week, everybody washed dishes one day. So it was an interesting thing, bless my father. But a part of it too was I was encouraged to believe I could do whatever I wanted. And so I thought I could. So did I think I'd end up being where I am? Well, not necessarily, but I was encouraged to believe, and I did, and I do, you can do whatever you set yourself up for. So that's kind of how I came into it. Did I know where I'd end up exactly? Well, probably not. But I mean, also, first one in my family to go to college, first one in my family to graduate college, and I'm not the oldest one. But encouraged to do whatever I set myself up to do. And that was very much from my parents and the way we were raised. Yeah. You were talking about engineering. One laugh I had when you said that. I never thought I'd get married because I figured nobody was going to marry an engineer that was a woman, right? Which is funny because I'm married. I have 4 kids. But, yeah. Married a long time.
That is funny. So what do you think has been the biggest barrier or motivators you've experienced as a female leader in a technical, male-dominated industry?
So I suppose you could say it was hard because I was always the one woman in the room for a long time. But I would say the hardest thing is to find your voice, right? So maybe you don't speak the same way, maybe you don't think the same way, but you have to find a way to communicate if you want to be heard. And so sometimes that meant, honestly, letting somebody think it was their idea. But when it came out of their mouth and they thought it was a good idea, I would go, yeah. And then sometimes maybe I would be annoyed and take credit for the idea. But it's more about making sure the good things happen, that the good ideas are heard, whether or not I got the credit for them, which, maybe that is sort of a way that we were suppressed over time. But if the good ideas come out, then I was pretty okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there have been and still are a lot of barriers. And when I think about like my history, when I first started as a young engineer in the United States, I worked in the Peace Corps right after college, so that was another different experience from sort of the gender standpoint. But the first place I worked in, there was actually men who had girly posters in their offices and kind of stuff on, public-facing bulletin boards that were really not appropriate. And so it didn't feel comfortable being there. And so it takes a level of, courage to put up with that. And the thing that's sad to me is for every woman who does, there's lots who just don't want to. And it's totally understandable. To be told you can't be an engineer because it's a man's job. Well, a good percentage of young women or girls are just going to decide not to do it. And to me, that's terribly, sad. And unfortunately, it's still a problem. Last month, I spoke to a group of students at SUNY Stony Brook, and it was women. It was what do you call that? STEM. Mm-hmm. It was like women studying STEM as in like historical context and what it means for them. And I asked them to go around the room and tell me a little about themselves. And 80% of them were not encouraged by their families, or they were questioned by their communities to be where they're at. So it's not over. There's still a big challenge. And I mean that's kind of a cultural systemic burden or barrier, as you put it. Yeah.
I wanted to. So you were reminding me with the posters. So my first job was in the Brooklyn plant for Pfizer, and I was a supervisor in the manufacturing plant, which had 300 guys old enough to be my father and or grandfather. And they were used to having a young engineer as their supervisor, but not with a ponytail. So that was the difference for me. And walking around the plant the first day, there were calendars all over the place. And you're right, I was not happy. But honestly, just kept my head up and kept walking. The miracle was, now here's a great story of somebody that helped me early in those days. The following day, they were gone. And I didn't learn until years later that the foreman, who was the first line supervisor, rest his soul, what a great guy, he made them all disappear. And he later told me, long after, years later, he said, I never really saw them until I was walking with you. And they all went away. So there was somebody, you'd say, great. But I agree with you. Too many people would ignore it, and how many young ladies would just say, this is too hard, right? And walk away. I'm not being encouraged. I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'll go do something else. And that's society trying to fix it. But anyway, God bless Henry, because he helped me.
And I totally understand that. I mean, I don't want to blame the women who can't step up, right? Or don't want to put up with it, for God's sake. I mean, really. Why should you have to?
Well, how do you go about building that confidence or that resiliency to that type of thing in the workplace?
Today, it doesn't happen. Or at least I can say my experience within Pfizer, that's just completely not tolerated. Just completely not tolerated. Whatever kind of behavior, whether it's female or anything else, there's just acceptance or encouragement to be who you are and to use your voice and to appreciate the fact that we all have something important to share. That's encouraged. Now, that may not be in every workplace, but I've been pretty happy to be in a place where that is encouraged.
I guess I can talk about cultural differences, West Coast, East Coast, a little bit without insulting anybody. Growing most of my career in Seattle, after girly posters were a thing of the past, and I got to see a lot more women joining the ranks. Our field people at the treatment plants, 20% were women, which was a great achievement over the time that I was there. And, we're growing women in the professional classes, engineering and project management and stuff like that. And so it felt good, right? So I moved to New York City. New York City progressive, but there's some old utility people and old utilities that have been around for more than 100 years. I literally felt like I was stepping back into the 1980s culturally. There was very few women. In the field, it's stretched to say 1%. In the office, it's maybe 20%. And it just felt that way. And the assumption was, in fact, somebody told me to my face, the only reason I was hired because I was a diversity hire. Ooh. And I was shocked, right?
Yeah.
And I wish I could replay that moment because I have so much better ways to respond to it than I did. But so that's been kind of bizarre in a way. And so, being the leader of a group, and the group is 1,800 in the Bureau of Wastewater Treatment, and just reestablishing leadership and leadership qualities and communication expectations and ending the practice of you get promoted because you've been here long enough and you're a good technical person, which is many times can be a recipe for disaster because, you're not necessarily a good manager. So when I arrived, I had to, reshuffle and encourage people to do things differently and or decide to retire because they weren't ready for it. But, that's been a transition. And I still think there's work to do in these, pockets of society where they just haven't, been able to transform as much for whatever reason.
So you asked, what have I done about it, or what could I do about it, or what could others do about it? I think it's about encouraging those to, use their voice, step up, and have the courage to do the right thing. It's interesting. Why is it? I would say within our management ranks, there are way more women than there once were. But coming out of engineering school, I think the numbers are still really low. So why is that? I have spent some time talking with students in the high school and the college level to encourage them to stick with science and engineering. I think some of it too, it's math and science are hard, right? But anything worth doing is hard. And don't you feel accomplished when you get it, right? So there's something about working as hard as you can at the hardest thing you can do to see what you can achieve, or at least that would be, the way I encourage people. But in the workplace, sometimes you have to call people out for behavior that's not okay. And what you were saying about it's not just what you do, right? That's the technical capabilities, but how you do it.
Right.
And today, I would say we're in a much better place in terms of rewarding not just what gets done, but how. So there's a piece of how we evaluate people that is looking at not just what they've accomplished, but how they go about it, and promoting those who do better with the how. Sometimes they may not even be the best ones technically, but the how matters. Funny, I often joke with my kids, I say the technical part of my job is cake. It's the people part that's hard. And so having those people skills and the how part, as I was trying to describe how you do it, it matters a lot. So that has to be encouraged. So for those who have maybe more sensitivity around social skills, that's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's actually a powerful strength about bringing people together. Yeah.
Well, and that describes leadership.
Yes.
You could be a super great technical person, but you know, if people don't want to work for you, or if you, you know, create an environment that is toxic and or just not empowering.
Yeah, bringing
Who
out
cares?
the best in people
Exactly.
means allowing
I mean,
them to
those
be themselves.
Super
Yeah.
technical people are needed, but they don't necessarily need to manage other people.
It's not a qualification for supervision.
Right.
Let's
Yeah.
just say that, right?
Right.
In order to bring out the best in people, they need to feel comfortable to be themselves. Yeah.
Right.
Do either of you feel like you've ever been treated differently because of your gender in the industry?
Yes. Actually, I'll tell one of my favorite stories, and then what did I do about it?
The facial expression said it all.
I was thinking about a lot of travel, right? So I did a lot of travel. And, you know, it would be in the evening time, we're having a meal, and somebody, inevitably, a man would say, and who's minding your children? Like, as if, God forbid, like, what would, and I said, their father. And I looked at him and I said, and who's minding yours?
That's a good one.
But of course, they look at me like I have antenna, you know. But yeah, I can be a little sarcastic.
God.
But
I don't know where to start on that.
It's a loaded question.
Well, I did mention I worked in the Peace Corps. Actually, graduated college with a chemical and environmental engineering degree, and then went to work in Nepal and built water systems, which was, you know, and the thing that's amazing about that is I saw firsthand the importance of what we do in our industry for clean water and sanitation, because number one, we're public health service, right? Mm-hmm. So, but anyway, they were not used to any women in engineering, and you know, a lot of people I had to work with were a little bit shocked that I was there. And you know, I was in villages. I surveyed, designed water system, and then I worked for UNICEF projects, and I had a team of construction people, and then we built these, you know, remote water supply systems. Amazing, right? Yeah. Night and day, amazing. And the guy who was like ran it, the supervisor, he's like, I didn't believe you'd be able to do it. I just can't believe it. I didn't think you could do it. And I'm like, as if that's a compliment, you know. You know, and there, so, you know, but, setting that aside, but then starting in, you know, in the field where there were very few women, it was, you know, it just wasn't comfortable. And in fact, starting in engineering school, I started in 1979, there was very few women, and the professors, some of the older ones, just did not deal with it well, and, you know, challenged us, and, you know, it was just weird. One guy would put, you know, after every exam, he would put the highest score for a woman and the highest score for a man on the thing. Like, okay, this is the highest woman, this is the highest man. You would probably say girl and man. But
I think that would motivate me to just be
yeah,
the highest
of
score.
course. Yeah, exactly. And then it was like, okay, well, the women are higher, like most of the time here.
well, I can remember, you know, I'd be the one girl in the class, and he'd call on me every single time. But you know what? Then I answered the question. So it's fine.
Whatever.
Do you experience resistance when you're managing or leading groups of male employees?
No.
Never.
But I mean, well, maybe in the past, but certainly not now. But again, even then, well, how will I say this? It helps when you're the boss.
Yeah.
Sure does. You don't have a choice.
However, you know, if you really want to get the best of people, right, that's not how you lord it over them, right? So when I started working in that plant, I told you, 300 guys, old enough to be my father or grandfather. I had a lot to learn. So the most important thing I did, and I still do, is I listened, ask questions, and listen. And the amazing thing is, when people feel heard, they respond really well. So not only did I think I won them over, you know, I ended up changing to a different, oops, I'm banging the table, different part of the plant, and many of them wanted to come with me, which I think was a good testament, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So I think my experience is, I multiple times now, I've been hired in a position as a supervisor and start supervising or managing a group of people where some people in that group applied for the job.
Oh, that's
and now
tough.
I'm their boss,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
Okay, and multiple times the assumption from the team is, well, you just got hired because you're a woman, or, you
Right.
know, you're connected to somebody, or whatever the case may be. And so, it's kind of like they'll sit back with their arms crossed and, just assume I'm that, right?
Yeah.
But then eventually, win them over might be a good term. The best story I have about that is when I along the way, I was the manager of the largest treatment plant in the state of Washington. There was about 200 people in that group, and it was pretty much managerial-wise, it had been a mess for a long time. And my boss was like, I need somebody like you out there. So I'm like, I'm sure I could do this, but sure, if you think so. So I ended up being that, and it was this. And, like you're saying, I was the youngest, I was the only woman in the plant at the time, and, I was also like lean, and they're like big dudes, like stereotypical. One guy, Bill Lockinger, but the most like this, right? But I created a higher functioning organization, and my experience is 20% of the people hated that I was there because I was going to make them do their jobs in ways that was beneficial to the company, to the agency.
Yeah.
20% of the people loved that I was there because they were frustrated as hell. Beep that out. They were frustrated because they were high performers and the organization was dysfunctional. They couldn't get work done. So the 60% in the middle is the key. They're either going to join the happy people or they're going to slide into this is terrible. So that's been like kind of my formula in all these situations I've been in. But Bill Lockinger was one of those guys, probably in the middle. And then he literally eventually would get tears in his eyes and say, "You're the best thing that ever happened to this place. You're my favorite. I tell you this, you're my favorite. You're the best." Because my whole job was to figure out how to make them more effective. And he was one of those people who, was a very skilled person, but could not be effective in what he was able to do. So that, that's just what I think a testament to making people more effective and getting them to be at their highest potential and making that your job.
Yeah.
Really.
So it was you really think about somebody who actually works for me now. And before he reported to me, somebody told him about me, and he was afraid. Because I guess he heard that I was, strong-willed and what I'm not sure what he was afraid of.
Strong-willed.
Whatever. Yeah. Well, you can't have a woman doing that.
That's crazy.
Clear-spoken and strong-willed. But anyway, it didn't take long because he's fantastic. And I've helped him advance what he's trying to do, which is a topic area where people don't understand it very well. So he's definitely needed help being able to articulate it. Of course, he tells me I'm the best person he's ever worked for, which really touches my heart because I knew he actually had to get comfortable enough to tell me he was afraid of me in the beginning. I was like, what are you afraid of?
It's progress.
Just the opposite. It's just the opposite. We get along just great because he's fantastic. And I've helped him to do his work, which is what a leader's supposed to do, right?
Absolutely. Did you both have mentors as you were coming up that helped you to navigate different challenges?
I don't think I ever had what anybody might call a formal mentor. Not that I quite know what a formal mentor is, but it's not like I was on anybody's calendar to sit down and do career pathing. But I've had a number of people I met along the way that were helpful to me, both men and women, that I could go to ask questions when I was navigating something tricky. So yeah, I think relying on other people, both men and women, to help. A lot of men, actually, because that's who was around, by the way. Mm-hmm. Who could I ask, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there definitely were people who helped me.
Yeah, and for me, I never had like a formal mentor-mentee relationship. But I definitely was a sponge, and this is what I tell people too. I was a sponge for pieces of how people led or behaved that I thought were great.
Watch what works.
Even better, the stuff that you hated, the stuff that did not, like I had one boss, it's like, we had to get permits out for, environmental compliance, and I'd get all the work together, draft it, and put it on his desk. Literally would stay there for weeks. Literally. And he'd be doing some, big planning thing, and that was his job. It made me crazy, and it was not aligned with the mission of the organization. So you got to pick what drives you nuts or what you think is poor performing and what's high performing, and just kind of model that. But I would say, I just described my role at the treatment plant. I had this one boss, her name's Christy True, and I hope I'm going to send this to her when she hears this, who hired me first. I first worked in Washington State, worked 15 years for the state of Washington in environmental regulatory compliance, and then I worked 15 years for King County, which was the wastewater division for Metro Seattle area. She first hired me as the environmental permitting and regulatory, actually property acquisition person, which I had to learn. And then, and she kept giving me more to do, right? So I started with that, and then there was a whole new program she needed to set up for this insurance policy thing, which I had no idea about, but she had me lead that. And then, I got a few more jobs, and eventually she put me at the treatment plant, which I thought she was crazy, but I talked to other people who thought it might work. And so it is kind of like every time she needed something done that was challenging, it's like, let's get Pam to do it. That's what it felt like. And I got nervous anytime she would have me in her office by herself, like spontaneously. I'd be like,
Something's coming.
Kristen's following me to my office. Oh, no.
I think one of the most common things I would say in terms of helping people be successful, I'm going to go back to the people part stuff, is I know some people will say, you have to speak to somebody in the language that they understand. And I don't mean another language. I mean, so they can hear you. And some people say, well, no, I don't have to change, right? I'm right, so I need to do it my way. But what I found, and what I guess I've coached others, is you will be much more successful if the other person can hear you. So that means adjusting what you say and how you say it, so that you can be effective with the other person. In the end, that's your power. That's your strength. So no, you don't have to stand your ground and say, well, they have to hear me. Well, they're going to hear you better if you figure out how they can listen or how you can get across to them. So what makes that person tick? What's going to help them be successful? And then adapt. Much more beneficial than saying, I'm going to do it my way and you have to listen to me. That's not what I mean by finding your voice. It's more about finding out how you can find, the win-win thing, right? What does the other person need and how can you help them? That's the way to be more successful. How do you align the goals to drive things in the direction that you're trying to drive them?
Yeah, so I've heard you guys
Advice.
have a lot of really good advice, but any specific thoughts around advice for young women who are starting their careers and thinking about leadership and things that they should be doing to kind of prepare for that?
So I believe, maybe it's just the way I was raised in a meritocracy, which means those who do well, do well. So by that, what I said before, study the hardest stuff and do really well. Go for the hard assignment, volunteer for it, take on more work, and show that you can do it. Because those who do a good job, and generally, in my experience, are the ones who get promoted. But again, not just the what you do, but how you go about it. Don't, march around saying, I'm the best, that's why you have to give me this, or, I'm important. It's more, do the work and show that you can do the work, bring other people along. That's who gets promoted.
I think there's this pervasive challenge that we face as women, and especially in the technical industry. And late last year, I think we had a statewide Women of Water conference, and a lot of young women, a lot of young professionals in the group. It was interesting. Again, kind of reminds me of those STEM college people I talked to recently, in that there's still this lack of confidence that's pervasive, and because it's like I don't think I can do that, or I'm not sure I can do that. And I think men are socialized to be, I can do that, whether they're qualified or not. So I can do that. So so as one of the speakers at this conference, at the end, I said, I'm hearing this, and I have to tell you, that's been my experience too, in that I didn't think I was capable. And I hate the term fake it till you make it, because you're not freaking faking it. you're actually doing it. You might not think you are because you're a little delusional about your skills, but you're doing it, and then you'll make it. And so I want to say to them that it's not, if you don't have the confidence, you definitely have the courage. You have the courage to just do it and do well, because I know you have the skill set because you're in this room, as young professionals. And be able to, you'll be successful. So it's courage. If you don't have confidence, ignore that. And I literally until my 40s did not have confidence, even though I was performing. It took a long time to convince myself that I was good at what I do,
Yeah. It's the things that I attempt, that I am like shaking in my shoes and nervous about, and I'm up all night preparing for, that make me better at what I do. It's those things where I push myself outside of my comfort zone.
I think it's too common. Yeah. You said fake it till you make it. I think it's too common, or at least for me. It's that little nasty voice in my head. And I've spent a long time telling that nasty voice in my head to shut up. I mean, there's a reason why I am where I am, because I've done good work. But that little nasty voice in my head is there. I think it's for a lot of us. Yep. I would say, though, at least the field I'm in sustainability, almost every one of the big pharma, the sustainability lead is female, which is really interesting, because you wouldn't have said that. But again, it's a new space, and every one of us kind of grew up through the environmental space.
Wonder why that is.
I don't know, it's very curious. Look across big pharma. It's fascinating. So what I'm really enjoying is that, some of my closest colleagues in the industry are women, and it's brilliant women that I'm really happy to know. Yeah.
I want to add one more thing to what I was describing, that statewide women's conference we went to. One of the other common things was when a woman is complimented, she tries to talk the person out of it. Like, okay, so, yeah, you did a great job on the project. Well, it wasn't really me. It was this and this.
The whole team.
It's a whole team. And, they don't really, and then the thought process in their brain, and this was expressed, and I used to think this, they don't really know what they're talking about. I really did not do that good of a job. That is what the voice in the head says. Yeah. And that came up. And I said, this is what I learned. Get the compliment, shut up about that, but just say thank you. Like, I learned to say thank you when I got a compliment, and that was a big deal. And it sounds like ridiculously simple, but just to say thank you means I don't have to agree with you that you think I'm awesome, but you think I'm awesome, and you think I did a good job, so thank you for that. And then eventually, right, I'm not going to talk you out of it. And accept it, that just say thank you. Then it'll actually make a difference in how you perceive yourself. And I think that resonated well with, the women in the room and younger women in our profession.
Yeah, I read an article that women always say we're sorry too. Like, we're constantly apologizing for things in email and in conversations, and we have to stop apologizing, that our opinions matter, what we say matters. Don't apologize.
I have one there. So I'm sorry I'm late, which I'm always late. Like, I'm backed up with meetings, and I hate being late. But I've learned a new one, to say thank you for your patience when I'm a little late, which I'm always, because I'm running from one thing to the next.
Yeah. The other thing, this is another advice from, do not say, it might just be me, and to before you even talk, diminish your opinion.
You've hedged it.
It might only be me who thinks this, but it's like what you're diminishing what you're going to say already.
There's another one. So you put "I think" in front of a statement. Just state it. You know what I'm saying? I think that this, that, or the other. Just go on and say it, because the "I think" again, it hedges that it's your opinion versus fact. Facts matter.
It might just be me, but
well, that's that confidence, right? Of just taking it away right away, that what I'm saying might not be right.
Right.
Yeah. What any other words of advice for future generations? This is all really good advice.
So as I said, part of it is do the hardest thing you can get your hands on, right? And if you fail, my own experience is the things that I didn't do well are the ones I remember the best, because you learn so much from it. And again, I think some of it is beat myself up over the things I didn't do well, but you learn from them. So take on the hardest stuff And what hopefully would happen is that you have a supervisor that encourages you, even when you mess up, because it's the analysis of what went wrong and why that, again, helps us to learn. And then help other people, right? That's the best fun, right? Is what's that? I'm thinking of a song. It's Tim McGraw, help the one behind, right? Because it hasn't been so easy for some, like you and I have been on this road for a while. Help those who are coming along behind us. And it's much more fun, actually. Nothing I like better, yeah.
Yeah, and also in my experience, I like, you asked in the beginning, have you ever visualized yourself where you are? It's like, no way, right? But there have been barriers. There's been challenges, obviously. What I tell young people is, well, let me back up. Sometimes I run into people who are frustrated they're not moving ahead, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes, I really feel like sometimes the reason they're not moving ahead is because they're too looking ahead, and like their current responsibilities could be better, right? So I'm like, always just do your current job really, really well, and literally things will happen. Because like you're saying, do your current job really, really well, you're going to get more challenges because people are going to notice. And people are going to notice, and then there's new opportunities open up. So your focus should be your current job really well. Always look to take on new opportunities, and then things will open up for you. I feel like that's an organic thing. I'm not saying there's no sexism and racism that holds people back, but if you're doing that and you are held back, look elsewhere, because people want you, really.
The market is really hot for people who have technical skills. So I guess the other thought is, it's not always, you don't have to always go up. Some of the people sideways, zigzag, whatever it takes, because you can learn something taking a sideways job, even taking a demotion. It might have been a demotion. You'll learn something new. So learning is the thing, right? You got to keep learning, and for me, learning and meeting new people, right? That's the joy. And I agree. If you're doing a great job, and ask yourself, are you really doing a great job? You're doing a great job, and they're not promoting you, then leave. There are plenty of places that are going to appreciate your skills tomorrow. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I'm supervised, those people that are just doing their best every day, those are the ones you're looking for a way to promote them and to...
Right. And give them more
yeah.
stretch assignments.
Yeah.
And then like you're saying too, even if it's lateral, you're growing your skill set.
Yeah. So let's talk about your strategies in the workplace to promote gender equality. What have you seen that's worked well to promote inclusion in the workplace?
So I think inclusion in the workplace, and then there's even hiring practices, right? So I'm going to touch on hiring practices, and then I'll get back to inclusion in the workplace. So it might be that I look a little harder at a resume, trying to find the diverse candidate. It doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to hire the best person. But again, I have an example where we were looking to hire a fantastic candidate, and the person was concerned that the workplace would be too challenging, young family, need to balance. And I actually, in the midst of the interview process, I called her to talk to her about what it's like and the flexibility and the things that we do to encourage people to live their lives and still be their best at work. So if that means you need a couple hours in the afternoon, that's fine. You finish it up later. It's all about the work you deliver. So I took an extra step to call her. I didn't have to do that, right? I could have just done the interview and let it go. But I wanted to allay those concerns. So I think there's like another step you can take to try to help someone where it may be challenging to bring that diverse candidate in. And by the way, the person's amazing, but she is, and I knew she would be. But back to the workplace, I think listening and asking, isn't that a simple thing to say? If someone's not speaking, then ask a question so that you can hope they then will participate. Some people, it's our nature. Yes, I'm not quiet by nature, but some people are. And if you pay attention to who's quiet and ask them a question, that helps them to kind of jump into the conversation. It's about, why are they quiet? Who knows why they're quiet? You can work on helping them be more confident. Ask and listen and do something with what they say. Yeah.
So being in the public sector, where the hiring practices are very inflexible, particularly in New York City, In my previous role, not as bad. And I was able to create like new lines for entry level. So I was talking about the treatment plant experience, and we have treatment plant operators, mechanics, electricians, instrumentation and control, engine mechanics, and trades, and all the support services that go with that. And we didn't have an operator in training program. So you had to come as an operator, and it was a little bit challenging because you had to have 6 months at least of experience at a different plant and pass a statewide exam. And so we created this operator in training program, and all you needed to do was have a high school degree or a GED even, and there's a sort of physical using ladders kind of thing, and you could enter as a utility worker, get the experience at the plant, take the operator exam and become an operator, great career path. And so we were able to get a much broader group of folks, much more wide diversity, more women, and so that's been able to populate that. And then in the the white collar world, it eventually was happening as more women were available in the pool of technical skills. So then I moved to New York City, where like the civil service system is like a rock, and they give you a little hammer to try and make it move, And the thing that's amazing is the white collar world is super diverse in my office because it's New York City, and there's people from all over the world, and some of the leadership organizationally, the leadership was mostly folks who have been there a long time, so they tended to be more white, but that's changing rapidly. It's changing in my leadership team. But like the floor is like, the United Nations. It's great, love it. In the treatment plants, it's mostly because the recruiting has been, my dad worked there, my uncle worked there, and so it tends to be like Italian, Irish dudes, their kids, and some other, the racial diversity is changing as well, but it's kind of historically been a hand-me-down sort of position, and people get in because they know somebody. And the job spec to get in is like really, really narrow, so it's really challenging to get women in that track. And changing a job description or changing, anything in the city when it comes to hiring takes 10 years. And so, our job descriptions are literally like from the 1970s. So, like, it's really hard to do it. So we've got to try and crack that nut in multiple ways. And, I hired a great organizational development and human resources person, Kenya Lewis, who is brilliant. And we started, programs then COVID hit, and so a little more outreach, establishing a track in community colleges to get people the skill set so they can pass the state exam and then join the ranks of, there's a lot we can do, but it's so rigid and challenging. And, like calling somebody after an interview, I would get slapped for that. You can't, that's outside the process, So, that's tough. And figuring out how to crack it in New York City it's been a little more challenging in my experience.
It sounds like you're starting down the pipeline, though, like in community colleges to try.
That's really the only way to do it. And, we'll see. I mean, hopefully over time it'll change.
Yeah. Well, do you think there's a way to calculate positive impacts of having women as leaders in any organization?
Calculate's hard, but for sure what I can see is that some of the key values around leadership these days are building the team, engagement of the workforce, collaboration. Most women I know are pretty good at that. And so the things that we value in terms of encouraging and enabling to many people, maybe I'm making broad sweeping generalizations, do come easier to women. But what I have seen is that those behaviors are then being acknowledged, right? And for some men, they come easily, some don't. But we value skills of collaboration and inclusion and empowering. And maybe I'm wrong. I'm hesitating my own thoughts here again with that. But I think it comes more naturally to women than sometimes to men.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I know that there have been studies, right? And
Good.
I read
Data.
I read headlines, so I know everything. And one headline is that a more diverse workforce is higher performing, right? They make better decisions. And I've anecdotally seen that, right? So people from diverse backgrounds, culture, any range of identity, language, when you have a mix of different experiences, different backgrounds, different ways people view the world, different genders, your outcome is always better, right? And I do think, because I read a headline, that is been studied. I do think even Forbes magazine did something on that. And so obviously that is something to strive for, and we've seen it in practice. So that's where you can't deny the value of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, again, not sure I can cite the great data, but one of the things we do study is thinking styles in the group. So even if you have people all of the same gender or any other thing, we don't think the same way. And so what we've worked on doing is looking at our different thinking styles. So not so surprising in a science-based company, lots of them are analytical thinkers and, very technical. But we don't make great decisions when everybody's in the blue-green space, as we call it. There's this color wheel, if you've ever seen it. We need people who are more engaging and innovative and things like that. So it's absolutely true that you need a diversity of people. That diversity could come from race, gender, or other things, but it's also thinking types. So acknowledging that we think differently and appreciating that, we see way better results. I mean, I've seen a situation where everybody's kind of in the blue-green space and they're plain stuck, can't fix something, can't figure it out. That's because you need some new thoughts and some new thinkers.
Yeah, if you've got a room full of analytical people trying to solve a problem, they're all in their heads and they're focused on the weeds and the details, and you kind of need those expressive personalities to kind of pull that information out.
And I think I think that color wheel thing is great, because when you really look at it, you understand what me need to complement me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that behavior and skill set that used to annoy me because they're so different than I am are now complementary, and I need them.
Yeah.
I used to have a manager that was a co-worker, and then I became his boss, who was super thoughtful and slow and analytical in making decisions, and it used to make me crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, there's enough information to go on. And so, but then I figured out I really needed him. I needed him to get me to my level where I can make a decision, right? And I can move us in a certain direction. Because without him, I might be rash. I might miss something that's kind of a high risk thing. So he's looking at risk all the time, and I'm relying on him to fill in some gaps that I don't even know exist. So that's why that circle and diversity of thinking and perspective is super important, and it comes with the rainbow of people in our level of diversity to maximize that. Absolutely.
Any last closing thoughts around this topic? Anything you want that we didn't ask a question about that would be worthwhile?
No, I think I might end where I started, right? Nothing to hold you back but yourself. So whatever you set out to do, go do it. And go find people to help you. Don't be afraid to ask. My own experience, it's the rare example where you ask somebody for help and they won't help. Many people might not think to reach out, but ask for it. And if they turn you down, too bad for them. Go find somebody else to help.
Yeah, that's something I've had to work on. I have a hard time asking for help.
Oh, yeah. Or accepting help.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to encourage us to do that.
Yeah, so that's really good advice.
Okay, I'm going to disagree with you.
Oh.
I'm going to give a different perspective. You said nothing to hold you back except yourself. I think there's a lot of crap that can hold you back. Mm-hmm. Your parents, your environment, your culture, some problem person at work that the culture of the company won't deal with. So then the other half of what you said, find ways to navigate that, find ways for people to help you. Even file an EEO complaint if you have to, for God's sake, because that's what it's for, right? There's reasons for that. So I think there are a lot of barriers, but tenacity, persistence, courage, even if you don't have confidence, that's really what it takes. And there's people like us here and everybody in this room who are here really to help you navigate that and to really help promote you so that you can be your best. And, there's LinkedIn, there's 6,000 ways you could connect with people now. There's women engineering organizations, there's leadership organizations. So, we've got the platform for everybody to grow from right now. So
Might be a different
take
perspective, but I
advantage.
completely agree with you. Meaning, don't let it
We're not disagreeing.
We're not disagreeing. Don't let it hold you back. Find the way forward.
And don't blame yourself. Find a
don't
way
blame
forward.
yourself.
Find a path that works.
Yeah.
I think that's great, yeah.
Well, we want to thank you both for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and we hope that folks listening to this have found this to be as inspiring as we have, for sure. So,
Yes, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. We really appreciate it.
yeah.
It was good fun. Thanks.
Yeah, definitely. We know many of our listeners out there have their own engineering legend stories. We'd love to hear from you. Please send us your feedback, stories, and ideas for future episodes. You can reach out to us at info@brwncald.com. And this podcast was brought to you by Brown & Caldwell. It's our purpose and passion to safeguard water, maintain infrastructure, and restore habitats to keep our communities thriving. So until next time.